Hello and welcome to A Forest in the City, an exhibition at the Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation at the CSMVS in Mumbai. This is an exhibition that came out of a research project that we were doing at the Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute for Architecture. And my name is Rohan and me and Lisa Bjorkman were the principal investigators of the project. And this research project was also part of a larger investigation that was being held at the University of Edinburgh, which was called Navigating the Grid, and was interested in looking at access to infrastructure for poor communities who live in South Asia. So what Lisa and I were really interested in is looking at, especially in Mumbai, looking at people who live within the forest, because it's something that is a very unusual condition in Bombay to have a large national forest right in the heart of the city. And we also know that there are many communities who live within this forest. So this, for example, is this large forest that we have right in the heart of the city. Here you have Bihar and Powai Lake, over there you have the Thane Creek. And this is what we all know as the Sanjay Gandhi National Park. But there's also a part here that we all know as the Aarey Colony. There are many communities who live within this area. These are communities who are tribal, sometimes non-tribal communities, and access to infrastructure has always been a real problem for these communities. Because the forest is imagined as a place where no human inhabitation is possible, so access to infrastructure for these communities is dependent on that. And that has led to a really complicated way in which these communities have managed to survive and thrive within the city. So, what we were really looking at in the project is we were looking at this very act of representation that allows and disallows access to infrastructure. It is the government and the state's sort of representation of these maps and boundaries that says that this is the boundary of the forest within which some things are allowed and some things are not allowed. Meanwhile, communities like Mali communities, etc., have created different ways in which they are also trying to claim the forest. So we were interested in this battle of representation. We were interested in looking at how the forest is constantly changing, what is allowed in the forest, what is not allowed in the forest is also constantly changing, depending on the way that acts of representation are enabling and disabling access. So as a research project, we were really interested in making a conversation between these different acts of representation. We wanted to create a space where there would be dialogue across these different disciplines and different subjectivities so that we're able to see the contradictions and also able to maybe then discover ways out of these sorts of stalemates to create ways in which many of these communities can then access infrastructure. Right? So like I said, since we were really interested in acts of representation and creating a conversation with one another, we were, and maps are one way in which these acts of representation are made by the state. So there's a whole part of the exhibition that we call mapping the forest, different ways in which we've understood what the forest is and different ways in which the map becomes a way of claiming or denying access to infrastructure. And there's another part of the exhibition that is called the Forest of Claims, where we're looking at objects through which communities are accessing or denying claims to infrastructure. Right? So I'm going to leave you now with Ankush Chandra, who's really going to be talking about the mapping the forest section, and then Sonal Sundarajan will talk about the Forest of Claims, and Dinesh Barap is also going to be talking about a drawing that he's been making for the past 2 months in the museum itself. Ankush?
So the project what we were doing is firstly looking at the idea of mapping itself, because the process of mapping has been fundamental to the ways in which people have been denied or granted access. So what we see here is an attempt to understand how the state imagination of the forest exists, and that usually exists through the sort of state certified maps that are created by various agencies. So what we have here are 6 different maps of the different imaginations of forest as seen by the state, which includes the development plans, of which Bombay has 3, and you have the Ministry of Environment and Forest map of what the forest area in Bombay is, and then you have the regional plans. So when we started working with these maps and we started georeferencing and overlaying them with the real geography of the city, what we started to realize was that with every change in regime, there was a slight difference in the boundary of the forest. So if you notice in these maps, you will start to see that the boundary starts shifting slowly. Also, what happens with each of these changes in regimes is what is allowed and what is not allowed in the forest also kind of starts changing. right? So every single time the map changes, we've observed these sort of points of anomaly that start to come up. And these are the points where there are conflicts and there are contradictions to what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is legal, and what is illegal. Right, so you see the development plans, you have the regional plan, and basically all of these different sort of areas start getting carved out of what was originally the forest. All of the anomalies that you've seen here are actually stories that we were able to kind of identify through our research as well. So the research process itself involved us actually taking a walk through a large part of the forest, and what we identified was these various sort of points of contradiction where different ways in which life was occurring, right? So here we have a drawing that was made by our team, and what this does is sort of make an alternate imagination of what the forest is. While the map is like a cartographic sort of Cartesian imagination of what the boundary of the forest is, this opens that out. So we have the boundary of the forest opening up into a straight line. So this drawing starts from the Thane Creek and goes all the way through the forest to the Bihar Lake. And throughout all of the sort of region of forest that we have been walking in, we've identified these stories of how lived experiences occur, how life actually occurs. So if you notice some of these stories, we've kind of highlighted how people who live in the forest mediate access to different things. What you will also notice in these drawings are these sort of red highlights. Now these are the objects that you will find around in the Forest of Claims in the exhibition as well. So it's an interesting read of the life as it happens in the forest, and it's something that you would want to take some time to read. We also have a parallel imagination of the idea of life in the forest, which is a Barbie painting that has been drawn by Dinesh, which he would like to describe, I guess.
मैंने सिटी के बीच में फॉरेस्ट है, उसके ऊपर छोटी छोटी कहानियाँ बनाई हैं। जैसे एक ये स्टोरी है कि नेशनल पार्क में दादी है कि उनका देहांत हो चुका है, लेकिन उनके घर में टर्माइट ही है, बहुत सारे एनिमल है, स्नेक और छिपकली बैट्स। इसका रीज़न ये है कि वो आंटी के फैमिली मेम्बर कोई नहीं है, लेकिन वो पूरे एनिमल को फैमिली मेम्बर मानती है। और वैसे ही दूसरी स्टोरी है, 20 साल पहले एलिफेंट था नेशनल पार्क में, तो उसका कनेक्शन वहाँ के ट्राइबल लोगों के साथ कैसा था। तो उसकी मैंने एक स्टोरी बनाई कि महावत उसको गांव में लेके आया था, तो वहाँ के लोगों ने उसको खाना खिलाया, तो उसको एक आदत हो गई और कितनी भी बड़ी जंजीर रहने दो तोड़ के वापस गांव में ही आता था। तो उसका कनेक्शन वहाँ के लोगों के साथ कैसा हुआ था। फिर वो फॉरेस्ट में जाता था तो गांव के बच्चे उसके साथ घूमते थे, नदी में नहाते थे, लेकिन उसका एंडिंग ऐसा था कि शादी थी गांव में। जैसे एक पराया लड़की घर दूसरे घर जाती है, तो वैसे उसको ट्रक में फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट लेके दूसरे जगह पे लेके गए। फिर एक दूसरी स्टोरी है तुलसी लेक है नेशनल पार्क में, जिसका बॉम्बे को आधा पानी सप्लाई होता है। तो वहाँ पे जो आर्किटेक्चर रहता ब्रिटिश था, उसको रहने के लिए बनाया हुआ बंगलो है, वो साग के लकड़ी का है, वो अभी तक वैसा का वैसा ही है। और ये कोर एरिया होने के बावजूद वहाँ पे किसी को नहीं भेजा जाता। लेकिन तुलसी लेक बनाने से पहले तुलसी लेक के बीच में एक पाड़ा था, ठाकुर पाड़ा, उसको शिफ्ट किया था फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट ने। लेकिन उसमें से एक दादी तालाब के बाजू में घर बना के रहती थी, वो खुद फिशिंग करती थी, फिश लेके मार्केट में या पाड़े पाड़े में बेचने जाती थी। तालाब में इतने मगरमच्छ होने के बावजूद वो पानी में फिशिंग करती थी। फिर उसका कई दिन बाद देहांत हो गया था, लेकिन देहांत होने के बाद उनका अंतिम संस्कार वहाँ पे डैम बनाने के लिए जो वर्कर्स लोग थे उन्होंने ही किया था। और जैसे डैम बन रहा था तभी बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम्स आ रहे थे कि लोग मर रहे थे, डैम नहीं बन रहा था, वो टूट रहा था तो लोग भाग रहे थे। लेकिन वहाँ पे एक पुजारी को बुलाया गया पूजा के लिए कि उसका नाम क्या रखे कि डैम को कोई दिक्कत ना आ जाए। तो फिर उसके मुंह से निकला था कि तुलसी ये नाम दे दो। तो सबको शौक लगा था कि तुलसी की, क्योंकि वो दादी का नाम था तुलसी, उसके नाम से ये तालाब को नाम दिया था तुलसी लेक। और ये मेरे पहाड़ी का स्टोरी है कि वहाँ पे वाली कम्युनिटी है, और वहाँ के लोगों की संस्कृति क्या है उसके बारे में उनको दिखाना। लोग, बहुत सारे टूरिस्ट लोग आते हैं, फिर उनको वाली बेसिक आर्ट क्या होता है, जो ट्रायंगल, सर्कल, लाइंस और कर्व लाइंस, ये जो शेप्स है, आकार है, वो निसर्ग प्रकृति से लिए गए हैं, तो उसके ऊपर वाली आर्ट बनता है। तो उनको बेसिक वाली आर्ट दिखाना, जो वहाँ के लोग फूड खाते हैं, ट्रेडिशनल फूड, वो प्रोवाइड करना, ये सब छोटी छोटी मैंने कहानियाँ इसमें बनाई है।
We'll now go to the next segment of the exhibition. So very clearly, there's multiple sort of regimes of representation that we're trying to work with here. And in the project, another attempt was made to kind of do a comparative analysis of the different regimes of representation. So here is a section that we're calling drawings and dialogue. On the left is another Wali painting that has been done by Dinesh, and on the right, you see is a drawing made by Rohit Kudale, who is an architect, and these are drawings of the same part. So you'll be able to see the difference in the ways in which a space is imagined through different acts of drawing itself. What we have here is what we call the virtual forest, in which we are trying to break away from typical sort of modes of representation and try to immerse the viewer in the forest. So what we've done here is that the entire Sanjay Gandhi National Park is modeled, and it allows you to pick, as a viewer, to pick what kind of stories you might want to see. So in this case, there are some where from the stratospheric view, you are actually able to go down to a bird's eye view and look at the settings around you. There are also some stories which allow you to go down to the ground, take a walk along with some of the stakeholders and listen to the various stories and narratives that exist in those areas. So I'll ask Sonal now to explain the next section of the exhibition.
This section is the forest of claims, and as the team walked through the forest, they found a lot of objects that seem to have a certain power to make claims. So it's a collection of objects and stories about those objects and the stories of claim making. This is leopard's cap, which is also a way of the animal marking and claiming territory. This is a pigment stone, which Dinesh, these are pigment stones that Dinesh uses to make the colors for his Vadia, taught by his grandmother, which are all collected from the Daisa river actually. Over here you can see many other different kinds of objects, a lot of them documents, which are very important, which are very preciously kept also, as documents such as the caste certificate making a claim of tribal identity, or Kokhapi, which is a proof of the cultivation of land. There are markings done by the forest department, marking a territory of the forest. This is a very interesting object. This is a garden land. It has a porcupine quill and flowers collected from the garden, which the women wear in their hair when they go to a protest or a festival to mark themselves as Aarey. So there are diverse objects, everyday objects. There is an electric meter on this side, because in 97 actually all the services were taken away. They are not allowed to have a high court order services in the forest. But this is the story of how one Pada got an electric meter. So each of these objects, there are political posters, there are certificates for rehabilitation promised to them by government, and there are community groups that banners for community groups that are organizing themselves as part of the forest claims.
So, so this is the exhibition, but of course the exhibition is part of a much larger research project, and we've had, and as you can see, an exhibition like that is going to require us to have many partners who come from all different kinds of disciplines, and most importantly, we had many community members who are an integral part of the research project. We did not want to make a research project that had a space for researchers as separate from that of the subjects of the research. So we wanted to make a space where all of us together, coming from different subjectivities, would each sit and have a conversation with each other about the ways in which we think about the idea of the forest. So, and one of our key partners was Pani Samiti, which I think has been a really kind of, let's say, essential part of the research project, because they really had so much of so many relationships with people on the ground, and I think that is the reason why much of the exhibition has a direct relationship with the communities themselves. One of the things that we felt, and the reason why we think it's really important for us to have such an exhibition at the Jehangir Nicholson Art Foundation, is that it's important for these kinds of conversations concerning communities who live in the city, whom we know very little about, and it's important for us to understand their concerns and bring it into the public forum. So as part of the events as well, we've been having a series of events that are really, conversations, walkthroughs, seminars, workshops that are all about these questions, right? And this is also an important part of the project, because we do believe that even this exhibition, it's not the end of this conversation. We believe that this exhibition is part of a process through which these questions that concern these communities can be taken forward for the development of the city. Thank you.